moving through the season, we find ourselves at I Dated the Robot, which I don't know if very often you see this in the short list of the best episodes when the first four seasons were concerned, and those are the only episodes out and people were listing the best episodes.
Yeah, you don't really see this
Didn't
one.
really see this one as considered
Because
great.
it's a sitcom one, not a quote-unquote deep one or whatever.
Seemingly, yeah.
But it is kind of deep in a way.
No, it's
Not
a funnier
emotional.
prototype of what was more expounded upon in Spike Jonze's film Her, for example. But it's a very, 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 very nutshell version of that idea.
It's more, Her could be like a Futurama episode. They could have taken this episode that way. This episode's more like we've described a bunch of times, a season 2 episode, but now in season 3 taken to its utmost limits. Like this episode has always appealed as like just like modestly sort of, not even modestly, like overtly funny to me, but like modestly sci-fi and modestly conceptual.
It's quite sci-fi. It seems like one of the more obvious premises you could take in Futurama, to be honest. It seems like a premise that could have been in the first 2 seasons, but they've chosen to place it here when the show had been more honed and sort of the characters more developed.
And also, I always felt the social critique of like, Napster from that time as a bit maybe like sort of lightweight. Though watching it again recently, with the whole idea of image preservation, like, is weirdly sort of like prescient in a way. Because like even today, just this morning, I read an article about how David Attenborough is scared of like an AI voice of him that the BBC have that they may just use in perpetuity,
Sure.
And like this episode started as a sort of off-kilter Napster, polemic or something.
Something like that, yeah.
Like ended up actually like I always thought that the whole idea of that like personal image with Lucy Lubot being the romantic like image like sort of companion piece as a bit far-fetched in its like sort of societal critique, but it's actually like on rewatching it come around in a weird way where like it's actually now kind of relevant, I feel.
Yeah. No, it's a very, I think it's a fairly potent sci-fi premise, and they take all the humor out of it that they can, and they also the social analysis is fairly modest, but there's at least sort of like a minor proposition there, I guess.
Well, I always love the propaganda film.
That's terrific, yeah.
That's such a classic moment. But once again, it's only upon rewatching it. It's had a sort of another prescient relevance. Like, and it's like weird, like, retro future 50s thing. Like, they're in the future, but it's doing a 50s homage to what those sort of movies were like.
Yeah.
But also, like, the way it's like, the reason why human relationships exist. And then he flips the table and it's a baby.
Yeah.
And it just reminds me of the kind of strange, like, cyber contemporaneous situation we're in, where people talk about, like, demographics and populations and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it almost feels like it's a 50s thing, but coming from a contemporary circumstance.
Yeah.
And once again, like, Futurama was weirdly prescient with that, in that propaganda movie. Like, that sort of retro 50s thing is kind of happening now in a way.
Yeah, that paranoia that people aren't going to be having children, they'll just be staying indoors all day, whether it be on digital women.
Exactly.
In one form or another.
Exactly. I always thought that premise was really far-fetched, but it's actually come around in such a sort of fruitful way. It's interesting like that.
Yeah. No, it's really solid. Like it's a good script they've got together here. I think for an episode that's sort of like I guess kind of glorying in its celebrity guest star, it's relatively funny use of the celebrity in question, obviously Lucy Liu.
Yeah.
I've always really the opening sort of catapult of the episode, which is Fry doing all the things he's always wanted to do in the future, is one of the more brilliant
that's such a good
introductions to an episode, culminating in him riding the Tyrannosaurus Rex. And then we used this to love when we were young. We'd quote it on the school playground, Mommy, why is that man like that? Don't look at him, dear. Like, just like that, like, needless overreaction. Because we all knew these, like, mums who would just try to shelter their children from just, like, people having fun, basically. Because, we like the idea of, like, upsetting those sort of mums and, like, giving them those sort of reactions. So we just loved it, It's like us playing with our Tyrannosaurus Rex toy, it's almost the equivalent of it.
I always loved as well when Bender's just like, I'm sick of Cowboy Bender staring.
Classic.
Yeah, that opening part of the episode is so good as well. One of the
Yeah.
best opening segments to an episode.
Yeah.
Easily.
This might be one of the better. There's lots of brilliant episodes, and there's a number of brilliant episodes in season 3, but this is one of the better episodes of the season. I think it's just really solid. And
Yeah,
a
well,
good example of the show strengths around this particular time.
I always thought of it as just a really like solid, funny episode with like a sort of far-fetched polemic sci-fi premise, which has somehow on rewatching come around to be relevant. So it's got that on top of it now, as well as just being funny.
Yeah.
It's a very like interesting episode.
Oh, you know what's interesting? This is the first episode I saw any footage of. When the Lucy Liu clones the robots are trying to get them in the projection room there. Like, I remember it's been kind of creepy, and it seemed like this is a more sort of grown-up show than The Simpsons would be, say.
Sure.
And to some degree it is, some degree it isn't, but you know, like it was just very. Later, I saw bits of Raging Bender, and that was a lot more palatable. And then, of course, this is on like Foxtel at a relative's house, and then later, of course, they showed Space Pilot 3010 when they were advertising that, the hype.
Oh, that was classic.
I actually was at a relative's house when that was on. We watched it. We absolutely loved it.
That's when I would have first seen the first episode. But yeah, like I mentioned, the first episode I saw was Paradise Lost.
Yeah. I meant to say that. Yeah. And I remember coming home from we were at some thing, and then I got home just in time to airing the second episode, and they'd just gotten to Luna Park, and I was kind of excited. Oh my god, to see
that second episode's so good.
Yeah. You know, them being on the buggy there, the Crushinator, and then the Amy with the magnet, like that's classic.
Yeah.
And the claw machine.
Oh,
Good stuff.
And it's appropriate you bring up those sort of episodes, because this one, like you said, it's not in many like top lists, but it should be.
Yeah,
it's that good.
It could scrape into a top 25 of the first 4 seasons, perhaps.
Yeah, maybe at like 25 or in the 20s, but people don't seem to regard it as highly as some other episodes, whereas it should deserve some.
There's some really, really strong ones coming up. That's the thing. And it comes right after Time Keeps on Slipping, which is a candidate for the best one they did in the first 4 seasons.
And at least as far as the purely funny episodes go, this is up there, because it's just like line after line of hilarity. But yeah, once again, as far as like you're trying to say something, it's come around in a sort of prescient way, I feel.
There's a few intensely funny episodes coming up, actually.
Okay, nice. Well, not the next one, but...
Oh, no, that's...
I can't wait to do the next one.
No, that's a bit of an unappealing episode. And people aren't even going to... If anyone's watching this retrospective, they're going to skip that one. Anyway.
What's after the next one?
I'm pretty sure, like, arguably the best episode of the entire show is after that one.
Which is...
It's named after a famous... Actually, no. That's a little bit ahead. It's one of my favorite episodes of the show is next. After
yeah, that's a great episode.
That is a masterpiece. Like that Hell is Other Robots and a particular season 4 episode, which is the underrated masterpiece of the show.
Okay.
And of like Immanuel Kant would have had, and Schopenhauer would have had something to say about
which
this
one's
episode.
the one you're thinking of, the season 4 one? Yeah, spoiler.
Absolutely fabulous.
Oh, yeah, that's a great episode.
Wow.
Is that not a fan favorite?
I assume it probably is.
Because when I first saw that as a kid, that man, that's like a mind trip. That's like, to 11-year-old me, what, like, that Cronenberg movie, Videodrome,
right,
was like, to me, as like a 17-year-old getting high,
It's interesting, I think absolutely fabulous. I think the origin of that idea within a piece of fiction to sort of suggest that what had happened before was what was about to happen, and then he sort of imagined the outcome of what could have been. It's from a short story called The Incident in Owl Creek, I believe it's called. And I've read at least a synopsis of the short story, and I have to admit, like, how like literature up to a certain point is not exclusively, but like, sort of, even when they were innovating, it seems sort of trite and contrived, and you're sort of reading it and people talking about how great an innovation it was simply because the innovation's sort of there, and it's not really, it doesn't feel, it's not exactly a very rich read.
I feel that way about a lot of literature. The one that has cut through with me, in that sense, is The Waves by Virginia Woolf.
That's a bit later than I'm thinking of.
Covered by Robert
I'm thinking of stuff like mid 19th century onwards.
Okay. Oh,
is like my idea of
the
like more
novel
modern.
era.
Yeah,
Moby
yeah.
Dick and like
You know, like Nathaniel Hawthorne, Uncle Tom's Cabin, that sort of thing.
Okay, or in the English sense, like
Dickens.
Yeah, Dickens and you know, the other George Eliot or
Sure.
stuff like Thomas Paine.
Flaubert.
Yeah,
That's
Flaubert. Oh, that, yeah, that's a bit
French,
later.
yeah.
But that's like a Flaubert. I think I haven't read, but I'm pretty sure it's like a 20th century sort of testament to that era.
Oh, sure, yeah.
But yeah, I get what you mean. I really love the modernist stuff, like Wolf, obviously the Waves, stuff like that. Really does cut through in a way that literature really like. That's the whole point of modernism, you know, was to make literature that immediate. Like, you know.
Yeah, rather than this sort of like excessive formalism, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Which is where the 19th century like English novel and American imitation gets caught.
Oh yeah, very much so. Yeah. But the incident in Owl Creek, I feel like Absolutely Fabulous is the perfected rendition of that sort of story.
Okay, it's a bit more like immediate or something.
Well, think about. I feel like Macbeth as a script, as a drama, is a little bit A to B. Like, you think about how complex Hamlet, Othello, and King Lear is. I always thought Macbeth was a little bit A to B by comparison. It's like power corrupts, and it's almost implying as if the witches weren't there, Macbeth might have been a nicer chap. You know, it almost seems to operate like an Edgar Allan Poe story would later, without the fun prose and sort of hackneyed dialogue. Sometimes
a bit deeper than that, though. It's like well, in the sense of Macbeth, like you said, if it wasn't there, but it always is there for every man. You know. And so, like, Macbeth sort of has to deal with the forces around him, whether that be supernatural or like, natural, the political, right? And like Macbeth isn't the greatest play ever, but what I mean is it's a bit deeper than what you described.
Slightly, but there's a certain series of events which...
It's not the best Shakespeare by any means.
Which are, like, sort of, you know, boom, 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 A to B. It's like, as a synopsis, it's very... sort of narrow, dare I say, which is to say, like, when as a script, like, obviously when it's performed it can pop, but as when you're reading it actually is compared to reading Hamlet, King Lear and Othello, Mark Antony and Cleopatra even, there's something Richard III.
I think you've got it there, because it's like an atmosphere piece.
That's what I'm saying, when the films do it, say when Orson Welles or Kurosawa or Polanski do it, there's something very vivid about it.
Definitely.
You see the appeal of it then, rather than it be, you know, when you're reading
I'm sure if you saw like a good production of it.
Oh, sure, that goes without saying for anything, but the scripts of the plays, of his plays I mentioned, really do hold up on their own, I think.
Sure,
in a way that, like, even adolescent me always felt, even though it's very bloody and there's a lot of, you know, gruesome events in, I always thought Macbeth was a little bit like, compared to, I experienced Hamlet before that, I just thought, this isn't... Well, I know the Tempest I experienced when I was younger, and I was like, this is wild, you know.
No, that structurally, Macbeth is probably the most sort of conventional out of all the ones you've mentioned, for sure. Because even tonally, like, it's very conventional. Like, you mentioned Hamlet, the great... You remember Kurt Vonnegut has that great lecture about Hamlet, or like tonality and storytelling. And the great genius of Hamlet is just being this sort of monotone, like almost like a Camus, and it's like nihilist, like constant, just going along the one line of tonality.
It's a very bold thing to do in the context of a sort of like Judeo-Christian cosmology. Like, it's just very... I guess proto-Miltonian in its own way, like,
and anti Greek theatre as well. Because Greek theatre was about great like rises and falls. Of tonality, whereas Hamlet, very much has that concise, like, just middle, nothing feeling to it in a way.
Yeah, it's interesting like that, and they hold up quite well, because I've seen this in the Throne of Blood video, Kurosawa film recently, and I did find reading Shakespeare in high school actually quite entertaining compared to a lot of the other crap we had to study. I mean, you know, like, as I mentioned in that video, it's like the Shakespeare, you know, these narratives, they were so full of like the truth and sort of the underbelly of human impulses in a way that the sort of text they'd prescribed to you otherwise, you know, these kind of hacky award-winning 20th century novels, which were like, you know, careful enough to win awards, but not sort of truthful enough to actually be legally prescribed to high school students, you know what I mean? Sure. I know they sometimes prescribe you little older things like Catcher in the Rye, because that's been canonized to death now.
By this point, yeah.
So they'll let you. We didn't get that one, but like I know some schools they gave them Catcher in the Rye, which is sort of.
I did that in high school.
Well, there you go. Yeah, so like obviously that might have stood out as sort of like a legitimate sort of exercise compared to David Maloof or whatever, or Raymond Gaidar and that sort of nonsense.
Yes and no,
Peter
because
Carey,
it was a comparative study with Igby Goes Down.
Well, that's the junk, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, is there anything else to share about the episode?
Nah, this one's killer. Just watch it.
Thanks everyone.